Picture two sales conversations. In the first, a nervous salesperson rushes through a rigid script, desperately trying to close a $500 deal. They talk fast, interrupt the customer, and focus solely on features and discounts. Whereas in the second, a confident professional leads a structured conversation about a $10,000 investment. They speak with authority, ask thoughtful questions, and guide the prospect towards a transformation. The difference isn't just the price point, it's the entire approach to the conversation. I'm Alleyne, and over the last 13 years, I've closed over $50 million in total contract value and driven teams at companies like Twilio, AWS, and now Closers.io. Today, I'm going to break down exactly what separates average sales conversations from the million-dollar ones that elite performers have mastered. What I'm about to share isn't just theory. These are the exact frameworks and psychological tactics that have helped me and my teams consistently close high-ticket deals in just 1 to 3 conversations. Whether you're looking to break into high-ticket sales or you're already closing big deals, this will transform how you approach sales conversations forever. Let me tell you about 2 sales calls I recently reviewed. These conversations perfectly illustrate the difference between average and elite performance in high-ticket sales. The first call was with a salesperson, let's call him Mike, who was trying to close a $10,000 consulting package. Mike had all of the typical traits we see in average performers. He jumped straight into his pitch, rattled off features, and kept trying to overcome objections with discounts. When the prospect said they needed to think about it, Mike panicked and immediately offered 30% off. The call ended with a maybe, which in sales we all know typically means a firm no. Then there was Sarah. I observed her closing a $15,000 deal in a single conversation. The difference was night and day. She spent the first 20 minutes asking thoughtful questions, uncovering the real challenges in the prospect's business. She never once interrupted. Instead, she led the conversation with a calm confidence, like a doctor diagnosing a patient. When pricing came up, she didn't flinch. She simply tied the investment back to the cost of the problem that they had actually spent time uncovering. Sarah closed that deal, not because she was pushier or more aggressive than Mike. In fact, she spoke less than he did. She closed it because she approached the conversation with a completely different mindset. You see, there are 2 types of salespeople in this world. The first is an order taker. They focus on features, price, and trying to convince people to buy. They treat sales like a numbers game, hoping that if they talk to enough people, someone will just eventually say yes. The second is a trusted advisor. They approach each conversation like a doctor diagnosing a patient. They ask intelligent questions, they understand the real problems at hand, and they prescribe solutions that actually create genuine transformation. The million-dollar difference is that order takers close small deals through pressure and trusted advisors close big deals through true understanding. Now that you understand the mindset shift, let me break down exactly how elite performers structure these conversations. And I'm going to show you using a real example from my experience reviewing hundreds of calls at Closers.io. One of our top performers, we'll call her Rachel, recently closed a 5-figure deal in just 45 minutes. But what's fascinating isn't just that she closed it, it's how methodically she moved through each phase of the conversation. Let's break down the exact structure. First, you have discovery. This is where most salespeople get it completely wrong. They treat it like a quick checkbox before rushing to pitch. But watch how Rachel handled it. Before we dive in, I'd love to understand what prompted you to take this call today. It's a simple question, right? But notice what happens next. She let the prospect talk, expand, and explain for almost 20 minutes. She asked pointed follow-up questions that revealed not just surface-level problems, but a level 2 and 3 understanding of the drivers behind them. For example, how long has this been a challenge? What's it costing you to not have this figured out? And why solve this now versus 6 months ago? Each question built upon the last, creating what I call a cascade of revelation. By the time she finished discovery, the prospect had essentially sold themselves on needing a solution. But here's where it gets really interesting. Before Rachel even thought about presenting her solution, she did something that 99% of salespeople skip entirely, something I call the strategic bridge. But let me show you exactly how she did it. After that deep discovery phase, she said something that completely changed the dynamic of the conversation. Before I explain exactly how we might be able to help, I'd like to share what I think you need to do in order to solve this problem, completely independently of whether you work with us or not. Would that be helpful? Now pay close attention to what just happened. She didn't jump straight into pitching her service. Instead, she positioned herself as an expert with a genuine interest in solving the prospect's problem. Then she did something brilliant. She laid out 3 specific steps the prospect needed to take. First, they needed to restructure their offer to command premium pricing. Second, they needed a predictable way to generate qualified leads. And third, they needed sales systems and talent to convert those leads consistently. After explaining each step, she asked, "How confident do you feel that this will solve the challenges that led you to be on this call?" The prospect's response, "That's exactly what we need." Why was this so powerful? Because rather than trying to convince the prospect to buy something, she helped them to arrive at their own conclusions about what needed to be done. But there's another layer to this that most people miss. By laying out the solution before presenting her offer, she created what I call preemptive alignment. When it came time to present her actual solution, the prospect was already nodding along because they had already agreed that this was exactly what they needed. Now, this is where everything changes. Remember, at this point in Rachel's call, she hadn't even mentioned her company's solution yet, but she's done something far more valuable. She's built complete trust and alignment with the prospect. Now watch how she transitions into the actual pitch. Based on everything you've shared, let me explain exactly how we can help you to implement these 3 steps that we've discussed. What we do is actually quite different from typical agencies or consultants you might have worked with before. Pay close attention to the language. She's not just launching into features and benefits, she's creating a clear distinction in the prospect's mind. But here's where elite performers separate themselves even further. Rachel broke down her solution into what we call digestible pillars, each one tied directly back to the problems and goals that were discussed during discovery. An example here would look like, the first thing we'll do is optimize your offer using what we call our offer codex framework. This addresses exactly what you mentioned about struggling to command premium prices. Then we'll implement our short form funnel system, which will solve the lead generation challenges you described. And finally, we'll build out your sales infrastructure and place trained talent to handle those conversations. Now notice how each component connects back to their earlier discussion. This isn't coincidence. This is the deliberate architecture of the conversation. But there's a psychological principle at play here that most salespeople never grasp. Let me share something that I've observed after reviewing thousands of sales calls. There's a critical psychological moment that determines whether a high-ticket deal closes or it falls apart. And it usually happens right after you present the solution. Let's go back to Rachel's call. After laying out those 3 pillars, she did something that might seem counterintuitive. Instead of rushing to give the price or pushing for the close, she paused and asked, "Before we talk about the investment, I'd like to check something. Based on everything that we've covered so far, do you feel 100% that this would solve the challenges that we've covered throughout this call?" This question does 2 crucial things. First, it gives the prospect space to mentally try on the solution, and second, it separates the value of the solution from the actual price. Compare this to a typical salesperson who rushes straight into, "The investment for this program is $15,000. When you do that, you're asking the prospect to process the value and the price simultaneously. That's where you can often lose them. But watch what happened next on Rachel's call. After getting confirmation that a solution was exactly what they needed, she said, "Perfect. The investment for everything we discussed is $15,000. Is that within the realm of possibility?" Then, and this is crucial, she went completely silent. No justification, no backpedaling, no nervous rambling about payment plans and discounts, just confident silence. Why? Because if you've done the previous phases correctly and really understood their problems, built trust and aligned your solution, the price becomes a mere detail in a much bigger conversation about transformation. Now, even with perfect execution up until this point, you're still likely to face objections in high-ticket sales. But here's what most people don't understand about objections at this level. They're rarely about the actual price. Let me show you how this played out in Rachel's call. When she stated the investment, the prospect said what we hear all of the time: "I need to think about it." Most salespeople panic here. They start discounting or trying to convince the prospect. But watch how Rachel handled it. "I completely understand wanting to think this through. Can I just ask, what specifically do you feel you need to think about?" The prospect then revealed that they were concerned about the implementation time. Notice not price, but time. This is crucial because in high-ticket sales, the stated objection is rarely the real objection. Rachel then did something masterful. Instead of desperately trying to overcome this objection, she used what I call the isolation technique. I understand. So if we could solve the implementation timeline concern, would you be ready to move forward today? This is where average salespeople go wrong. They try to handle multiple objections simultaneously, creating a complex web of concerns. Elite performers isolate each objection and handle them one at a time. But there's an even deeper psychological piece at play here. The final phase of a high-ticket sale is where most salespeople lose control. But let me show you exactly how Rachel maintained command of the conversation through to the end. After isolating the implementation timeline concern, she did something subtle but powerful. Let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier that every month your delay is costing you around $30,000 in lost revenue. So even if implementation takes a few weeks, is it fair to say that you're actually losing more by waiting? Notice what she did there. She didn't argue with the prospect's concern. Instead, she helped them to reframe the situation using their own words from discovery. Then she used what I call the decision stack. Do you remain committed to solving this problem? Do you still 100% believe what we discussed would solve it? And so if we align on finding a path to make the numbers work, would that get us over the line here? Each question builds upon the last, creating a logical pathway to commitment. And this is worlds apart from the desperate, what can I do to earn your business today approach that most salespeople tend to use. But here's the $1 million lesson about closing high-ticket deals. The close isn't a specific moment or magic phrase, it's the natural conclusion to a well-structured conversation. Think about it for a moment. Rachel spent nearly 80% of her time understanding the problem and building value. The actual closing sequence took less than 5 minutes. Let me wrap this up by sharing something I've learned after closing over $50 million in total contract value and being a part of sales teams at companies like Twilio, AWS, and now Closers.io. The difference between average salespeople and elite performers isn't natural talent. It's not even experience, it's about their approach to the conversation. Average salespeople see sales as a battle to be won, whereas elite performers see it as a diagnosis to be made. Average salespeople rush to pitch, and elite performers take time to understand. Average salespeople try to convince, whereas elite performers help prospects to convince themselves. Let's look at Rachel's call again. 20 minutes of deep discovery, strategic pre-pitch to build alignment, a solution presented in clear, digestible pillars, objections isolated and handled one at a time, and a closing sequence that felt natural and not forced. This is the framework that consistently closes 5-figure deals in a single conversation, and it's the type of sales approach that we look for in talent when building our sales teams here at Closers.io. If you're watching this and you recognize that spark, that desire to master high-ticket sales, I want to hear from you. We're always looking for ambitious salespeople who want to learn these frameworks and to join our team. So send me a direct message on LinkedIn explaining why you'd be a great fit. Don't just tell me about your experience, tell me why you're ready to elevate your game to this level. And if you found value in this breakdown, make sure you like and subscribe. We're just getting started with these deep dives into elite sales performance. And remember, the $1 million difference isn't in what you say, it's about how you structure the conversation. Until then, keep climbing, and I'll see you on the next one.